Are you paying too much in taxes? Elevated Tax and Accounting is a firm that specializes in tax planning and strategy to minimize your tax bill. Elevated Tax consult with you on tax strategy throughout the year, so no more waiting until the end of the year and hoping for the best. As a business owner, you know your sole focus should be spent working on your business, not in it. Outsourcing gives you the time to concentrate on the core reasons you started your company, to create and innovate a top-tier product and generate profits. Elevated Tax and Accounting, elevating you and your business with a modern professional touch.
Driving along on the highway and you've been hit by a semi-truck. Now what do? You call your Montana attorneys, Ryan and Miller. We have the expertise to help guide you along in these specific types of accidents. So these are the 3 steps that you need to follow. Number 1, make sure that the police are called and that there is a report of the accident. Second, make sure that you're getting the medical attention that you need and following up with your doctor. Third, do not talk to an insurance company until you've talked to an attorney. They are not going to help you protect your rights, and you want to make sure that you know all that you're entitled to. Contact an attorney today by clicking the link below.
Time now for our ESPN Roundtable, and we'll keep talking NFL draft because we had several gentlemen from the state of Montana drafted into the NFL, including a young man who got an elevated amount of publicity only because of his fast rise, but also because he was featured on ESPN.com as ESPN's latest Prospect X. The author of that story is Kalyn Kahler, a writer for ESPN, and she joins us now here on the ESPN Roundtable. Kalyn, thanks for being here. How you doing?
Hey, Colter, doing well. Thanks for having me.
First of all, tell us a little bit about the background of Prospect X. I've read this for several years now, but this must be such a fun story to pursue as a journalist and a sports writer. But just tell people about sort of the origins and how this has all evolved, and then we'll get to Tommy. But just tell people about the background of it.
Yeah, so this is my 7th year of doing the series, and I started it at Sports Illustrated. I was covering the draft pretty closely then and was doing like a weekly college football column during the college football season as far as like draft prospects during the season to keep an eye on. And one of my editors at SI was like, it'd be really cool if, we could find a player who is like not getting the accolades post NFL season in the pre-draft process that most of the, players who are drafted will get, like getting invited to the combine or getting an all-star game invitation, and see if we can find someone who's going to get drafted who like nobody's heard of or, just isn't getting the attention now that the draft is so well covered. Like, see if you can find someone and let's write a story about them, and we'll keep them anonymous in the first story because in order for a team, no NFL team wants to tell you who their sleeper prospect is in the first place because, there isn't really sleepers anymore. That doesn't really exist anymore where a player can be really undiscovered by the NFL. Or one team thinks they discovered a player. That doesn't really happen anymore because, scouting technology is so advanced now that guys are just not really falling through the cracks because everybody has a whole data system to find those guys when they test well. Anyways, so that was the concept is like, let's keep the player anonymous in the first part of the series. And then after the draft, we'll reveal what happened to them. And that was done so that it'd be kind of a fun mystery for readers to guess who it is. And also so that the teams wouldn't have to jeopardize their interest in a player. And we keep the teams anonymous as well. So in the first story, it's like Prospect X is this player, and we're dropping hints in the first story about who he might be. And, there are some hints about who the teams are, like an AFC South team or, an NFC East team or a special teams coordinator here or there. But we keep it as a mystery. And then after the draft, we tell you what happened to him. So that's the origin of the series. And it was so much fun the first year that I did it that I've just done it every year since. So been doing a player every draft process since 2019.
Well, as somebody that's covered the NFL draft for so long, that's such an interesting element. We've talked about that on this show several times about how the element of a sleeper is kind of by the wayside because even if you're a small school prospect, you got film. Everybody's got all these different things. They got the huddle, they got the highlight film, they got, pro days and all that sort of stuff. So how do you think that's impacted just the way teams go about the NFL draft? Because in my opinion, I think that teams, they gravitate towards safer picks now, which caters towards the Power 5, but there are still some great small school prospects to be had. How have you seen it evolve just because of that sort of element of scouting?
Yeah, I mean, it changes every year that I've done this story because it's getting a lot harder for me now to find a player that fits my criteria, which is no combine, no all-star game. Sometimes I'll pick a player who was at one of the lower tier all-star games because there's really only 3 all-star games that matter. in the draft process. And then the rest of them are like just smaller, and some scouts will go, but they're not like well attended as far as NFL scouts being there. But it's getting harder for me every year because players are transferring up with the transfer portal and with NIL opportunities. So there are fewer and fewer players, even at the FCS level, there are fewer players than there used to be. And so I usually like to pick a smaller school guy because those are the guys that are getting overlooked the most. And the reality is there just aren't that many small school prospects anymore because the majority of them are transferring up. Like this year, there were actually no Division II players drafted at all. And I'm not sure what the numbers are that are on that historically. I don't know if it's like every year there's somebody from D2 who's typically drafted, but and at the combine this year, there were only 7 players from FCS level football. Everybody else was FBS. So that shows you how NIL has changed things. And I think when it relates to sleepers, that's kind of why there are no sleepers anymore either, is because anybody who was going to remain anonymous or remain, a mystery guy with less visibility is playing at a bigger school now. And Tommy was actually a really interesting choice for me because I almost didn't pick him because I thought he was too famous, which he is in a sense, because in the state of Montana, as you know, and as all of your listeners know very well, he is a local celebrity. He is a local hero. Everyone knows who he is. I went to dinner with him and his girlfriend when I visited Bozeman to do this story. And, we didn't have to pay for our appetizer and we got free dessert because the server was like, "Oh my gosh, it's Tommy Mellott. Hey, Tommy, thank you so much for everything you did for Montana State football. It was so exciting to watch you this year." And that happened multiple times. I spent, parts of 2 days hanging out with him, and that happened many times throughout the 2-day experience. And so I almost didn't pick him for the series because I was like, he's not overlooked in the sense of like his own celebrity and his own college football success, but he very much was still overlooked as an NFL prospect. And he even didn't think he was much of a prospect at all. Like he thought he was going to get a rookie minicamp invite, and that was it. Like until his pro day happened, and he sort of saw the impact that pro day had, where he ran a 4.3940, which is extremely fast, really for any position, but especially for someone who is labeled as a quarterback. Like he's going to appear as a quarterback in NFL team scouting databases. So if you're running a 4.39 and you're labeled as a quarterback, you're going to be triggering every scouting system's alert system of like, "Oh, whoa, who is this player who just set off our filters for anybody who runs this fast at this size, at this position?" So he really didn't understand that he had an NFL future really honestly until like April, like after his pro day, which was crazy. Because even when I went to go spend time with him, his parents were still planning to go to an AC/DC concert in Las Vegas on Saturday of the draft because they didn't think he was getting drafted. And they didn't understand that he was like very, very sure thing going to be signing a undrafted free agent contract if he was not drafted. So that reality, I think, sank into them after obviously I came and spent time with him, and then they're like, "Whoa." And then Tommy gets to visit Cincinnati. He went to the Bengals. He did his 30 visit to the Bengals facility. He's talking to more scouts throughout the process. 2 different NFL teams came to Bozeman to work him out as a receiver. And I think after all of that happened, he was like, "Oh, actually, I might have an NFL future." But it took a while for that to sort of sink in for him.
Join Town Pump's Pump It Up Rewards Plus program and never pay full price for fuel again.
Save 5 cents on every gallon every day at any Town Pump across Montana.
Plus, earn and redeem points on your favorite in-store items to get free stuff with our clubs.
Stop in and pick up a rewards card. Download the Pump It Up Rewards Plus app today.
Or visit townpump.com/rewards to register and start saving.
Right down the road. Pump it up. Oh, yeah.
I think that's what made him the perfect Prospect X, though. That's the story. Prospect X. Kalyn Kahler joining us from ESPN. Tommy Mellott, the subject of Prospect X this year. You're listening to ESPN Radio, or maybe you're watching on SWX Montana Television or streaming on the ESPN MT app. So because of that, what was the ultimate decision then to go with Tommy? Because you're right. In Montana, folk heroes are hard to come by, just like draft sleepers are hard to come by this day and age, right? But he is a legitimate folk hero. I mean, he's Tommy Touchdown. He's this kid from Butte, America, who rose through the ranks and took the state by storm, and he is recognizable everywhere. I mean, he had the one great quote from Bill Foley that said, he's on a first name basis with everybody in the state. Like when you say Tommy, people know who you're talking about. That's pretty cool. So what was the determining factor then? Do you say, okay, I want to go and make sure this is the guy that we want to profile this year?
Yeah, I think it was because I have a lot of different things I look for in the process. Obviously, I'm getting recommendations from scouts. I'm asking coaches what they think of players. I'm talking to their agents to get a sense of what the NFL interest in them is too, seeing if they have any visits lined up, seeing if they have any private workouts scheduled. I obviously had to wait until Tommy's pro day to see how he ran because I was told he was going to run very fast, and I was told he was going to catch passes and run routes as well, which was something that I think teams also needed to satisfy, is that he would be willing to switch positions and not play quarterback in the NFL. So I had my second choice guy actually also got drafted. He was a tight end from Utah, Caleb Lohner. He went to the Broncos in the 7th round. He'd only played 1 year of college football. He played college basketball for 4 years before that. So he was also a really interesting player as well. And he had, I think, 330 visits lined up. He visited 3 teams in the process. So I had a pretty good feeling he was going to get drafted. So I was like, well, let's see what happens with Tommy. Let's see how fast he runs. Because I thought Tommy would be a more interesting story probably, or a better fit for this, because like if I'm trying to describe a tight end who's never played football until 1 season, it's like, okay, that's hard to like keep that anonymous and to like make that a mystery. It's like, that's a pretty distinct feature that this other player had. So once Tommy ran fast, that checked the box for me of like, okay, he's going to generate more interest here. And then once he had a 30 visit scheduled, his agent let me know, hey, he's going to be visiting the Bengals. And by the way, he's got a workout scheduled tomorrow. So he had a workout with the Cowboys scheduled, I think it was a Thursday. And his agent told me the Wednesday night before that the workout was going to be that next afternoon at 4:00. And I was like, wonder if I could get there in time. So I looked at flights, and I live in Chicago, so I was able to get there in time. It wasn't a direct flight, but I got there, I think, at like 1:00. So I was there with plenty of time before this workout. And I love to like see the scene of a workout. And if a coach is flying, across the country to work out a prospect in the pre-draft process, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to draft that player, but it definitely means there is significant interest in a player. And, definitely that team thinks that they might be interested in drafting that guy, or spending a good chunk of money on them as a free agent. So I thought that was a good sign. And then I knew he had a second one scheduled as well. And so I was like, okay, this feels like enough interest. Things are ramping up here. Let's do it. And I'd heard obviously some really great things about him from NFL scouts. And like, I think I had talked to one special teams coordinator too, who was like, yeah, I got my eye on him. He's really interesting. There's a lot of potential there with like running a fake punt, because if he gets the ball, anything could happen. And if he's lined up as a personal protector on punt, he's going to threaten the defense, because they know, okay, this guy used to be a quarterback. Like, watch out. Like this may not really be a punt. So I think special teams coordinators started to like really talk about him a lot in April, and that generated a lot of momentum for him too.
Big Sky Breakdown, proudly presented by the Bobcat Collective at Montana State. The Bobcat Collective is the NIL collective that serves Montana State University student athletes. The collective is partnered with Montana State to connect fans, alumni, businesses, and local nonprofits with Montana State student athletes. Opportunities through the collective allow student athletes to earn compensation while serving the greater Montana State University community. Sign up now for memberships and enjoy automatic entry into raffles for free tickets while supporting the bright minds at Montana State. They have multiple different membership tiers, and you can also be a one-time supporter, and you can also business partner or corporate supporter. Visit bobcatcollective.com for more. The fact that he's such a unique character as well, he's one of those fascinating people I've ever covered. I love the scene that you had in your first story where you were with his mom, and she pulls you aside and she says, I have to tell you, like, this guy is like computer smart. Like, we don't know where he came from, but this guy's like a genius. He really is. Like, he's like a mathematical genius, and that's what made him so fun to cover, because he has this whole football thing, but he also has like this whole other thing, right? I mean, this guy's going to be wildly successful even if he doesn't make it to the NFL. Tell us about profiling a guy like that. That must have been really fun for you to just report and also write about.
Yeah, I knew he was really smart going into it because I'd heard that from his agent, and I'd heard from teams, from scouts, that he was like through the roof character grade. Like, if you could score 100% on like however they evaluate your character, like that's what he was doing. So that was really interesting to like talk to his professors. I talked to two of his professors in the financial engineering department at Montana State about just like what he was, who he was as a scholar, as a student, as well as an athlete. And, there were a couple stories in there that one of his professors had to have another professor review a paper that he turned in because they didn't think he really wrote it. They're like, how could a quarterback of a FCS successful football team who has all these demands and commitments on his time, how could he possibly do this much work and this much research on a paper? And then there was another one where the professor had to get the head of the department to review it because they weren't familiar with the technical aspect, meaning like the equations that he had used to come to his conclusion. So yeah, he is really, really smart. And it was really fun to get to meet his family and his mom and dad. I met one of his sisters. I met his younger sister, who is opposite of him in personality. And I met his girlfriend, which was really cool to get to know her as well. And like, I was a little worried Tommy was going to be too shy or like too, because I've done this story in the past where like a lot of the players who fit this description are very straightforward and like they don't want attention. They don't want people to be like writing about them. They just don't really want to be in the limelight. And he very much is that. He's very humble. He doesn't really love attention. He didn't want to have a draft party because he just didn't want all those people like sitting around staring at him, waiting for him to get a phone call. That made him uncomfortable. He's not that type of personality, but he was very open with me. He shared a ton of stuff. He was super interesting. So I was a little worried that he might be like a little too, type A and like studious, but he really wasn't. He still showed a ton of personality and was super interesting to be around.
Is a will you marry me in your future? Or maybe you do it all over again. Hi, I'm Brian Toon with Jewelry Design Center, inviting you to come see the largest selection of Will You Marry Me in the state of Montana. The brightest diamonds of every shape and size, unique settings built to last, and skilled jewelers on site offering free sizing and maintenance for life, because that's how long we want to be your jeweler. Jewelry Design Center in Missoula, on Brooks, across from the Montana Club.
Cash One Pawn has the most extensive inventory of any pawn shop in western Montana. Whether you're in the market for firearms, power tools, bows, video game consoles, or sunglasses, Cash One Pawn is the best deals around. And now Cash One Pawn gives you the ability to shop online from anywhere. Make CashOnePawn.com part of your shopping habits. Also make sure to download the Cash One Pawn app. Cash One Pawn, Missoula's premier pawn shop, located on Roller Coaster Road on the way to the Y. Kalyn Kahler joining us here on Nuanez Now ESPN Radio. She wrote the story Prospect X, which Prospect X this year was the Walter Payton Award winner for Butte, Montana, Tommy Mellott, senior last year for the Montana State Bobcats. How about that element? What'd you think of Butte? Had you ever been to Butte before? Have you ever been to Montana before?
Actually, yes. And I've been to Butte before because this is really random, but I am an Irish dancer and I teach Irish dancing. Yep. And they have an Irish Fest in Butte every August, I think. So about 10 years ago, maybe more, it was probably 2013. I actually performed at the Butte Irish Festival as a Irish dancer. So I have been to Butte and I was there for the whole weekend and stayed with some really nice families who live there. Shout out to the Rosa family if you're listening. And we have a dance school. My dance school has a like sister school called Tiernan Irish Dancing. So shout out to Tiernan as well. They're in Butte, Montana, as well as I think Boise, Idaho, I believe. But yeah, so I had been to Montana once before and I love it. It's great. The people are so nice. I'm from Wisconsin originally. So
yeah, similar,
yeah, it's like a similar demographic of people. People are really nice. Bozeman was beautiful. I had not been to Bozeman. I'd flown into there, but I had not spent time there last time I was there because we just kind of left and went to Butte and spent all our time in Butte. So yeah, I loved Montana. It was so much fun. And that was a great selling point as to like why I should do the story on Tommy. Because I was like, I'm going to get to go to Montana and spend some time there.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, so then the first part of the story comes out. It's anonymously written, and it was very well done. But then on your Twitter mentions, everybody's saying that's an FCS fan. Oh, it's Tommy Mellott. It's got to be Tommy Mellott. Are you sitting there saying, "Hey, stop tweeting this. I got to block all these people"? Or what do you think of just the reaction when people were kind of guessing who it was?
Well, usually people do. I mean, I had some scouts guessing incorrectly. Actually, a lot of people thought it was a running back from Eastern Washington named Efton Chisholm.
Oh yeah, yeah. A wide receiver from East Washington. Yeah, but
is he a wide
similar
receiver?
Story,
Okay,
totally. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people thought that's who it was because he was really. I think he was like an academic All-American or something similar. So people thought it was him. So that was a guess I was getting a lot. But obviously, the most popular guess was Tommy Mellott, and I knew that people in Montana were going to know right away who it was. I was like, "There's nothing I can do." To like obscure this to the point where no one's going to know who he is, because such a fun and cool part of writing about him was the fact that he was this local celebrity. So I definitely wanted to like convey that in the story. And so I was like, well, as soon as I write that, it's going to be clear to Montana people like who I'm talking about. But I made sure to not say he was a quarterback in the first story. So then it could be like, well, is he switching from like running back to receiver? Or is he switching from like a different position receiver to slot receiver? Like you could have had a couple options there, but yeah, I knew that Montana people were going to know right away. They were going to see right through me.
Is there anything particularly that you took away from this, just spending time with him or just spending time around people from the FCS or Montana State or just in Montana? Anything you learned from this whole process this year?
I think it was an interesting case study for me going back to the draft prospect, just because this is very inside the draft, but I think it's interesting. So like I've done this 7 times. 3 of my previous 6 had been drafted before Tommy, and all 3 who had been drafted before had visited the team that drafted them. And they all had at least 3 visits. And in the NFL, they call those 30 visits. And so I was sort of thinking the only team that could draft Tommy would be the Cincinnati Bengals based off of my previous data, because only one team brought him in for a visit. And I knew that wasn't 100% the case, but I was like, okay, I don't really know. So I didn't know what to expect. I had a good feeling he was going to get drafted, but I was surprised that he got drafted by only having one team visit. And I think part of that is because his pro day was so late. It was on April 4th. And by that point, a lot of teams are like already in full staff draft meetings and they've completed most of their 30 visits by then. And then the other part of that, after I talked to the Raiders general manager, I asked him why they didn't bring Tommy in for a visit. And he was like, well, there's multiple reasons, but one of the reasons was that they didn't want to tip off the rest of the NFL that they were really interested in this player, because they're like, if you see he's only taken 1 or 2 visits and you are interested in him, then I have to get in front of whatever the team is that brought him in on a visit if I want to draft him. So they didn't want any team to think like, oh, we have to get in front of the Raiders to pick him before the Raiders could pick him. So I thought that was really interesting. I don't know. I was talking to another team about that and they were like, they're doing too much. Like that wasn't necessary. They're like, everybody knew who Tommy Mellott was. Like nobody was gonna, like that wasn't gonna like ruin their chances of drafting him. But I sort of disagree with that take too, because it's like not everyone did know who Tommy Mellott was, because I heard from a scout in September, or I heard from one of their strength coaches that a scout came in September and Tommy was not on his list of players to be checking in on at Montana State. So, obviously by the end of the season, I think Tommy had cemented, his status as an FCS hero, obviously, but I think teams still needed to know he was going to be okay with converting to a different position, and they needed to come up with plans internally about how they could use him on special teams to make it worth spending a draft pick on him.
Well, last thing for you then, when he got drafted, that must have been cool for you. I mean, you probably want Prospect X to get his name called.
Totally. Yeah, it's really fun because normally, I mean, I don't even know how many reporters are actually watching the last day of the draft, because unless you're covering, if you're covering a specific team, then you're paying attention to your team's picks, obviously. But, it's usually not that interesting because you just don't really know who a lot of these guys are on day 3. But for me, I'm like, oh my God, I'm in the 6th round. I'm like freaking out because I knew it was going to be like 6th or 7th round for him. So yeah, it was really fun. I was screaming. I was like, yes.
Well, that's awesome. Well, you did a phenomenal job, and appreciate you sharing some insight with us. You can still find these stories on ESPN.com as well as on Kalyn's social medias. But thanks so much for swinging by today. It was nice talking to you, and thanks so much for helping share the story of Montana to the rest of the world.
Of course. Thanks for having me.